Your daughter's wheelchair blocked property access.
Your heart blocked basic humanity.
Her voice cut through the afternoon like glass. "Remove that thing immediately," she snapped, tapping her crimson heel against the welcome mat outside my door. The mat my daughter had chosen, the one that said, "Home is where the wheels stop." The board chair stood there, framed by sunlight. Clipboard clutched to her chest like a badge of divinity. Behind her, my little girl sat in her wheelchair, fingers tight on the armrest, confusion etched across her face. "You heard me," Victoria Langford said again, louder now. "That slogan violates the uniform aesthetics policy." For a heartbeat, the air felt still. Then the world tilted. She reached down and slammed the chair backward. The thud of metal against pavement split the silence. My daughter screamed. I don't remember moving. I just remember the sound of rubber burning as I shoved past the clipboard queen and caught the chair before it tipped. The tyrant in heels stumbled back, but her expression didn't change. Only her lipstick cracked from the tension. If you've ever seen someone use rules to humiliate the powerless, hit the subscribe button now. I said, my voice shaking. Stay here. What happens next will remind you that bullies always overplay their hand. That was my version of a prayer. I turned toward her, my hand steadying the chair. "You just assaulted a child, Victoria." She smirked. "Your opinion. Our bylaws allow immediate correction of violations that compromise community harmony." "Community harmony," I repeated, the words burning. "You mean kindness written in fine print?" Her gaze flicked to my daughter. "You people always twist things into drama. Maybe if you followed standards, this wouldn't happen." I could feel heat climbing up my spine. I wanted to shout, but rage alone never wins. Instead, I knelt beside my daughter. "You okay, baby?" She nodded faintly, tears mixing with dust on her cheek. I looked back at the enforcer in crimson. "You don't know who you just pushed." Her laugh was low, sharp. "Another homeowner with an attitude?" "No," I said. "A man who spent 12 years ensuring federal accessibility codes were enforced in every public building from Raleigh to D.C. For the first time, her jaw tensed. "I design spaces," I continued, standing tall, "so people like my daughter can live without being reminded of their limits. You just broke federal law on camera." Her eyes darted toward the corner security post, where Nathan Pierce, the maintenance supervisor, stood frozen, half hidden by the hedge. He looked away when she caught him staring. The officer of rules adjusted her blazer, trying to reclaim control. "If you're implying a threat, I don't threaten," I said evenly. "I document." Her posture stiffened. "Then you'd better document the complaint you'll be getting for aggressive behavior." Behind her, neighbors were starting to gather, phones lifted, Olby whispers carrying. The clipboard queen finally realized she'd lost the luxury of secrecy. She spun on her heel and walked toward her car, muttering something about community optics. When she was gone, the silence hit heavier than the crash had. I crouched again beside the wheelchair, brushing gravel from the tire. My daughter was quiet, eyes wide and far away. "Daddy," she whispered, "why'd she hate our mat?" "Because," I wanted to say, "people like her need control the way we need air." But I only smiled faintly and said, "She doesn't get to decide who belongs here." That night, as the sun bled behind the rooftops of Brookstone Reserve, I replayed it all, the slap of metal, the flash of red, the small flinch of guilt on Nathan's face. My sister's voice echoed in my mind from years ago. When power crosses into cruelty, you don't argue, you prosecute. I opened my laptop and pulled up Federal Statute 42 U.S.C. 12132, Discrimination against an individual with a disability in public services. HOA common grounds qualified under multiple precedents. The welcome mat lay folded on the table beside me, the fabric frayed where the wheel caught during the fall. I traced the letters, "Home is where the wheels stop," and felt something inside settle into purpose. Victoria Langford thought today was about compliance. She'd learn soon it was about consequence. The next morning, her SUV was already idling at the entrance to my driveway, silver paint reflecting the dawn like a mirror held up to arrogance. Victoria Langford was never one to wait for consequence. She preferred to stage control before anyone else woke up to question it. The board chair stood beside her car, crisp as ever, clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon she couldn't be separated from. "You're in violation," she began, before I'd even stepped off the porch. "For what this time?" I asked, coffee still warm in my hand. "The unsanctioned ramp," she said flatly. "Your little structure doesn't meet aesthetic code." I looked past her, toward the wooden ramp I'd built myself, angled perfectly, sealed against moisture, designed with more precision than any piece of this neighborhood deserved. My daughter's wheelchair sat halfway down it, morning light catching the silver spokes like a crown. "It meets ADA grade and structural standards," I said, "and it's not up for debate." The clipboard queen smirked. "It's up for whatever the board says it's up for. You may know your federal jargon, but here, neighborhood rules take precedence." There it was again, that smug little twist of hierarchy she'd love to flash, like law ended at the HOA gates. "You ever read your own bylaws?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed. "I wrote them." "Then you know Section 4C states the board cannot restrict accessibility modifications without a safety justification." The tyrant in heels folded her arms. "Safety justification? That ramp could cause injury if it's not approved. Liability falls on the HOA." I took a slow step forward. "Liability's already fallen on you, Victoria. You just don't know it yet." Behind her, Nathan Pierce lingered near the hedge again, same hesitant posture as before. He carried a tool belt, but hadn't lifted a finger. He was watching, listening. His silence said more than his loyalty ever could. "Remove it by Friday," the officer of rules said sharply, "or the board will hire removal services, and you'll be invoiced for damages." "Touch it," I said quietly, "and you'll trigger a criminal complaint." Her eyes flicked up, meeting mine. "You're bluffing." "Try me." The enforcer in crimson stood there another moment, every muscle in her face fighting between pride and fear. Then she turned, heels crunching the gravel, and climbed back into her SUV. When she drove off, the sound of tires on pavement felt like static, like interference before the next signal. Inside, my sister Sarah sat at the kitchen counter, laptop open, phone pressed to her shoulder. "That's 3 violations she's stacked in 24 hours, she said, covering the receiver. "She's building a paper trail for intimidation." I leaned on the counter. "Good. I'm building one for prosecution." Sarah ended her call. "You need to stay measured, Mike. Let her hang herself with process, not rage." "I'm measured," I said, "but I'm not passive." Later that afternoon, I drove to the HOA office, a sterile brick box behind manicured hedges. The receptionist didn't meet my eyes when she handed me a notice of violation form, already stamped, already signed by the board chair. In the lobby, I heard her voice through the glass partition, smooth, professional, and venomous. "Make sure the newsletter mentions compliance concerns at Lot 42. We can't have sympathy turning into insubordination." Lot 42. My home. I walked out before she saw me. By the time I got back, my daughter was on the ramp again, watching a butterfly rest on her wheel. Her laughter cut through everything. The tension, the noise, the shame. That's when I knew I couldn't just fight for us. I'd fight for every family who ever felt humiliated by a petty tyrant in heels. That evening, I filed my first official ADA grievance online, attaching footage from my door camera. Sarah helped me word every sentence like a scalpel. "Keep it surgical," she said, "facts over fury." Before sending it, I glanced once more at the video. Still, Victoria Langford's hand on my daughter's wheelchair, frozen mid-motion. The timestamp blinked in the corner like a countdown. I clicked submit. 2 days later, the board chair came back, this time with backup. A black sedan idled beside her SUV, engine purring low, 2 men in maintenance uniforms stepping out like soldiers reporting for duty. The enforcer in crimson didn't look at me right. Away. She didn't need to. The clipboard under her arm already declared her authority. "Morning, Mr. Grant," she said, her tone dipped in politeness sharp enough to bleed. "We're here for a safety inspection. Routine." "Routine?" I asked. "You're 3 days early for your own posted schedule." Her smile was thin. "We take safety seriously. And your recent modifications raise several concerns." I glanced toward the ramp. It stood there solid, clean, even beautiful under the sunlight, built by hand, approved by physics, rejected by ego. "You mean the ramp that's safer than the HOA steps you're standing on?" The clipboard queen ignored the jab. "We'll proceed with a structural review. Nathan?" That name hit the air like a warning. From behind the sedan, Nathan Pierce appeared, tool bag slung over one shoulder, face paler than usual. His eyes darted toward me, then away. Guilt clung to him like humidity. "I didn't call this," he murmured under his breath, low enough for only me to hear. But the tyrant in heels caught the shift in his tone. "Nathan," she snapped, "check the support beams and take photos. Liability is on the line." He nodded, shoulders tense. I could see the tremor in his hands as he crouched near the ramp, pretending to measure while keeping his gaze averted. "Funny thing about liability," I said, watching her. "It usually lands hardest on the one who overreaches." "Spoken like a man who's read too many blogs," the officer of rules replied. "You might want to focus on compliance instead of courtroom fantasies." Behind her, my daughter watched from the window, her little hand pressed against the glass, worry etched in her features. That sight grounded me. It reminded me why I couldn't afford to lose control. "Go ahead," I told Nathan quietly. "Do what you have to." He hesitated. His tape measure clattered once, then stopped halfway down the rail. "It's within tolerance," he said finally. Victoria Langford's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" He swallowed. "Structurally sound, no visible hazards." The clipboard queen's jaw flexed. "Noted, but aesthetics matter too. It's unsightly." "That's your problem," I said. "You can't regulate dignity." Her gaze sharpened. "I can regulate appearances, and in Brookstone Reserve, appearances are everything." I stepped closer. "You know, for someone so obsessed with order, you're remarkably sloppy about the law. Did you know federal oversight trumps HOA bylaw when it comes to accessibility?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Sarah had told me to stay calm. Instead, I smiled. "It's fine. Keep sending your fines and threats. Every one you issue just makes my case stronger." Victoria turned away sharply, motioning to her crew. "Wrap it up. This inspection's over." Nathan lingered a moment longer. When she wasn't looking, he mouthed two words at me. "I'm sorry." The enforcer in crimson caught his hesitation. "Nathan," she barked, "get in the car." He obeyed, eyes still flicking back once before the door slammed shut. As the vehicles rolled out, dust lifted off the curb like smoke after a quiet explosion. That evening, I sat on the porch with my daughter as the neighborhood lights flickered on. "Is she coming back?" she asked softly. "Not for a while," I said. "She's got paperwork to fake first." She giggled, but the sound didn't reach her eyes. Inside, Sarah's message pinged on my phone. "DOJ contact confirmed. Send me all footage by morning." For the first time in days, my breath came easy. The fight was no longer just mine. It was about to become federal. Still, one image lingered, Nathan's trembling hands. The conflicted witness was cracking, and when he finally broke, Victoria Langford would lose more than her clipboard. She'd lose the illusion of control. And I intended to be right there when it happened. By Thursday morning, Brookstone Reserve felt colder, quieter, like the neighborhood itself had started watching me. Curtains shifted when I passed, conversations dipped, and even the sprinklers seemed to hiss louder near my lawn. That's how you knew Victoria Langford's gossip machine was working. The clipboard queen didn't just enforce rules, she weaponized whispers. At 9 sharp, a new letter appeared taped to my mailbox. The paper was thick, embossed with the HOA seal. And her handwriting, not typed, handwritten, a signature of arrogance. Final notice, removal of ramp. 24 hours compliance required. 24 hours. That's how long the tyrant in heels was giving me before she acted. I didn't rip the letter down. I left it there, waving like a flag of war. Inside, Sarah was pacing the living room, with her phone pressed against her ear, her voice clipped and sharp. "Yes, he has the footage. No, she didn't just threaten removal. She physically assaulted a disabled minor. We're submitting under Title II." She caught my gaze mid-sentence and mouthed, "She's in real trouble." Still, Victoria Langford wasn't backing down. By mid-afternoon, I saw her again, walking up the street in that same crimson blazer. The enforcer in crimson surrounded by 2 board members, retirees who looked terrified of her, but even more terrified of not following orders. She stopped right at the edge of my property, eyes locked on the ramp like it was a personal insult. "Afternoon, Michael," she called. Her tone carried fake charm, stretched thin over barbed wire. "I see you received the notice." I stood at the top of the ramp, arms crossed. You really don't know when to quit, do you? Her smile tightened. You think federal buzzwords protect you? This community operates under its own governance. You signed the agreement when you moved in. Yeah, I said. And nowhere in that agreement did it say you get to endanger my child for curb appeal. The board chair stepped forward, clipboard ready. Aesthetics define value. If one homeowner disrupts uniformity, the entire neighborhood suffers. I'm sure your daughter doesn't want to cause that kind of trouble. It wasn't just condescension, it was psychological warfare, guilt disguised as civility. You don't get to use my daughter in your arguments, I said, my voice low but shaking. She blinked, pretending innocence. I'm simply trying to maintain order. You, on the other hand, seem intent on creating chaos. Behind her, Nathan Pierce stood again, hands stuffed into his pockets, face pale. He couldn't meet my eyes. The conflicted witness had become a shadow of himself, walking the fine line between his paycheck and his conscience. Victoria, I said, deliberately using her first name. You're already under investigation. Her chin lifted. By who? My sister, I said. And the Department of Justice will have her back before the week ends. That wiped the smile clean off the officer of rules. For a second, the street went silent except for the hum of her idling SUV. Then she leaned in, voice low. You think you scare me with lawyers? I built this community. People listen to me, not to you. Then they'll listen when your name hits the indictment list. Her jaw twitched. She turned sharply, snapping her fingers for the others to follow. The enforcer in crimson didn't look back, but her voice carried as she walked away. 24 hours, Mr. Grant. After that, we remove it by force. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with every file, every timestamp, every bit of footage queued on my laptop. The glow from the screen washed over the folded welcome mat, that same one she'd deemed a violation, now lying silent like evidence in a case that wouldn't go away. At midnight, I heard a faint noise outside, tires crunching gravel. I pulled the curtain aside. Headlights flashed briefly, then disappeared down the cul-de-sac. Was it paranoia or preparation? By dawn, the decision was made. I wasn't waiting for the next letter. The clipboard queen wanted a show of compliance. She'd get a show of defiance instead. And when the cameras rolled this time, it wouldn't just be mine watching. By sunrise, the neighborhood smelled like rain and tension. A fine drizzle slicked the pavement, turning every reflection into something distorted and uncertain. I was on the porch when I saw her, Victoria Langford, striding down the street with a red umbrella, and that same unshakable confidence that made her look more like an empress than a neighbor. The board chair never missed a chance to turn intimidation into a performance. Behind her walked two maintenance workers in neon vests, hauling a power drill and a crowbar. My chest tightened. They weren't here to talk. They were here to dismantle. I stepped off the porch before they reached the ramp. Don't take another step, I warned. The clipboard queen didn't flinch. Good morning to you too, Mr. Grant. I see the deadline expired. The deadline was illegal. The enforcer in crimson smiled under her umbrella. Funny thing about rules, Michael. The ones you break don't stop existing just because you disagree with them. I glanced at the workers. Touch that ramp and you're violating ADA Title II and the Fair Housing Act. She tilted her head. Bold words for someone living under community law. Community law doesn't supersede federal law, I said, and you're seconds away from learning that. One of the workers hesitated, eyes darting between us. Ma'am, he murmured, this doesn't look right. That's enough. The tyrant in heels snapped. Proceed. The man stepped back. The second worker looked like he wanted to disappear. I could see the fear spreading. Victoria's control only worked when people believed she couldn't be touched. But that illusion was crumbling. Nathan Pierce's truck rolled up then, old and dusty, a lifeline wrapped in hesitation. He climbed out, rain dripping off his cap, and stared at the scene. Morning, I called. You here for inspection or demolition? He swallowed hard. She called me for supervision. The officer of rules folded her arms. Let's be clear, Mr. Grant. Your defiance is now public record. I've notified the insurance board. You'll lose coverage by the end of the week. That's fine, I said, because by the end of the week, you'll be dealing with federal prosecutors. The clipboard queen blinked, her composure cracking for the briefest second. You're bluffing again. Not this time, I said, holding up my phone. The recording icon blinked red. "You've been on camera since you stepped onto my driveway." Rain tapped harder now, each drop punctuating her silence. Behind her, the workers slowly backed away toward the truck. Even Nathan looked at her like the spell was breaking. "You think the world cares about a petty neighborhood spat?" she said, her voice low, brittle. "I think they'll care about a woman who attacked a disabled child, issued unlawful fines, and threatened to destroy federally protected property," I said. For the first time, Victoria Langford looked small. The enforcer in crimson wasn't invincible anymore. She was just a woman realizing her fortress was made of paper. "Leave," I said quietly. Her jaw locked, but her feet obeyed. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," I said. "It's just starting." She stormed off, umbrella snapping in the wind. The rain blurred her figure into something almost ghostly, a reminder of how power looks right before it falls. Nathan lingered, shoulders slumped. "She's scared," he said softly. "She should be." He looked at the ramp, then back at me. "I can't keep pretending I don't see it anymore." "Then don't," I told him. He nodded once. "I'll bring you something tomorrow. You'll need it." After he left, I went inside, dripping and shaking, not from cold, but from the realization that the game had shifted. Victoria Langford had crossed a line she couldn't uncross, and now her own people were starting to see the truth. That night, Sarah called. "We got confirmation," she said. "DOJ accepted the preliminary complaint. They're reviewing her actions under disability discrimination statutes." I exhaled. For the first time in weeks, the air felt clean. Outside, the rain stopped. The ramp glistened under the porch light, defiant and unbroken. And somewhere down the street, I knew the clipboard queen was watching, realizing that her next letter wouldn't be a warning. It would be evidence. By Friday morning, the storm had moved from the sky to the streets. The HOA's group chat, once a place for garage sale flyers and lost cat photos, had turned into a tribunal. Screenshots of my ramp, my yard, and even my daughter's wheelchair were being dissected like evidence in a crime. The board chair's fingerprints were all over it. Her tone echoed through every carefully worded concern. "If we allow one exemption," Victoria Langford wrote, "we invite chaos. I refuse to let Brookstone Reserve turn into a circus of sympathy." I didn't need to reply. The neighbors were already whispering. Some defended me. Others, loyal to the clipboard queen, echoed her line about order and standards. She was splitting the neighborhood with precision, isolating me like infection she meant to cauterize. Still, I'd been expecting this. Sarah had warned me. "Bullies don't fight fair, Mike. They fight loud." I wasn't planning to match her volume. I was planning to cut through it. That afternoon, a black sedan from the city's disability rights office pulled up in front of my house. 2 inspectors stepped out, federal badges glinting under the sun. I didn't call them. Sarah did. Their visit was official, documented, and lethal to people like Victoria Langford. The enforcer in crimson appeared almost instantly, as if summoned by radar. "Excuse me," she called, storming across the street in her heels. "What's the meaning of this?" "Federal review," one inspector said calmly. "We're here to assess potential ADA violations." "This is private property," the tyrant in heels snapped. "You need board authorization to conduct any—" "Ma'am," the inspector interrupted, flashing his badge again. "We operate under federal jurisdiction. Your authorization isn't required." That line landed like thunder. Victoria's expression didn't falter, but the muscle under her jaw twitched. "At least inform me of your findings. As board president, I'm entitled to oversight." "Actually," the inspector replied, "you're the subject of the inquiry." For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't have a script ready. The clipboard queen glanced at me, eyes blazing. "You think this scares me?" she whispered. "No," I said evenly. "I think it exposes you." The inspector spent the next hour documenting the ramp, taking measurements, and photographing the original notice she'd taped to my mailbox. Nathan Pierce watched from a distance again, this time his phone in hand, filming the board chair as she tried to maintain her poise. When the officers left, she turned on him like a viper. "Delete that video!" she hissed. He didn't. "Victoria," I said quietly, "you built this house of rules so carefully that you forgot to check if it was sitting on quicksand." She shot back. "You think this will make you a hero? You'll ruin your reputation long before you ruin mine." You already did that for yourself, I said. Her eyes lingered on the inspector's car pulling away, then on the ramp, then back at me. You'll regret this, she muttered, voice low, shaking. I doubt that. When she left, Nathan walked up, his face pale but determined. She's panicking, he said. She called an emergency board meeting for tonight. No notice, no agenda. She's covering tracks, I said, and she'll slip doing it. He hesitated, glancing toward her house. There's something else. She told the landscapers to pull the ramp out after dark. Said it's a safety hazard. My pulse spiked. When? Tonight? Midnight? That was all I needed to hear. At 11:47 p.m., my cameras caught them. The officer of rules herself and two contractors standing in the rain, flashlights sweeping across the yard. She wasn't even hiding anymore. I opened the door before they touched it. You step 1 inch closer, I warned, and you'll see what obstruction of federal procedure looks like. She froze. For a moment, no one breathed. The clipboard queen lowered her flashlight slowly, the rain streaking down her face like melted pride. You're playing with fire, she said. I took a step forward. No, you are. Behind me, the porch light flicked on. My daughter was watching from the window again, silent, steady, brave. Victoria saw her and finally broke eye contact. Without another word, she turned, her heels splashing through puddles as she vanished into the dark. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't just losing control, she was losing fear. And people who stop fearing consequences, they become dangerous. The morning after the midnight standoff, Brookstone Reserve was buzzing. Someone had leaked the footage. Within hours, the video of Victoria Langford, the board chair, standing in the rain with a flashlight and two contractors at midnight, spread through every neighborhood forum and Facebook group from here to Willow Creek. The caption read, HOA caught violating federal access law. Again. I didn't post it. Nathan did. By the time I saw him walking up my driveway that afternoon, his face looked like it had aged 10 years overnight. His hands shook slightly, a mix of relief and fear. She's coming after me, he said, before I could even offer him coffee. She called you? I asked. He nodded. 3 times, said I betrayed community confidentiality, said she'd sue me for defamation if I didn't delete everything. I leaned back against the railing. Did you? He shook his head. No, I'm done covering for her. For the first time, the conflicted witness looked free. The enforcer in crimson wasn't taking it well. That afternoon, she sent a community-wide email calling Nathan's video deeply manipulated and accusing certain residents of spreading misinformation that damages the integrity of the HOA. But the damage was already irreversible. People were whispering about her temper, her threats, her obsession with control. She's unraveling, Sarah said when I called her later that evening. You just need one more piece, something that connects her abuse of power to an official violation of the law. The rest, I'll handle. That one more piece came sooner than I expected. At sunset, Nathan returned, this time with a manila folder clutched under his arm. His eyes darted around as if every tree might be recording. She's been hiding things, he whispered. Board invoices, private communications, internal emails. I frowned. How'd you get those? He looked ashamed. I was the one filing them. I saw her signatures on things that shouldn't exist, like contracts with her cousin's company for lawn maintenance billed at triple market rate. And worse, she labeled your daughter's ramp as temporary structure built without design approval on an insurance claim. My jaw tightened. She's trying to get the HOA reimbursed for damage she caused herself. He nodded. Exactly. That's fraud, Mike. Federal fraud. The clipboard queen had crossed from cruelty into criminality. I flipped through the pages, my pulse pounding as each document painted a clearer picture. Unauthorized spending, fake compliance reports, and photos of my property attached to financial claims. This is enough to bury her, I said. Nathan swallowed hard. There's something else? She's planning to hold an emergency vote tomorrow night. She wants to expel you from the association for non-compliance and defamation of leadership. She'll use it as a distraction. Of course she would. The tyrant in heels never lost control publicly. She always redirected it. I set the papers down and looked Nathan straight in the eye. Then we're going to that meeting, but this time, she won't be the only one with a clipboard. He hesitated. If she finds out I gave you these, I'm done. She'll destroy my career. You did the right thing, I said. And when this is over, people will finally see who you really are. He nodded slowly, voice trembling. You promise this gets handled legally? By the book, I said. Sarah's already building the case. That night, I scanned every document, cataloged every email, and forwarded the evidence to Sarah. She replied within minutes. This is exactly what I needed. She won't survive this one. Outside, I saw the officer of rules pacing near the community gate, talking to someone on her phone. Her gestures were sharp, frantic. She wasn't controlling the narrative anymore, and that terrified her. When she turned, our eyes met from across the street. Even from that distance, I could see the fury boiling beneath her polished calm. She mouthed something. 3 words I didn't need sound to understand. This isn't over. But she was wrong. It was over the moment her ally switched sides. Inside, I looked at the folder again, the final weapon she'd unknowingly handed me through the man she once trusted most. Tomorrow night's meeting would be her stage, but for once, she wouldn't be the one holding the mic. The night of the emergency HOA meeting, Brookstone Reserve didn't feel like a neighborhood anymore. It felt like a battlefield wrapped in manicured lawns and porch lights. Cars lined the cul-de-sac, rain puddles reflecting the amber glow of the clubhouse windows. Inside, the tension was so thick it could have been bottled and sold as fear. Victoria Langford stood at the front, poised like a monarch at trial. The board chair wore her signature crimson blazer, hair pinned into its usual immaculate twist. The clipboard queen had chosen her armor carefully tonight. Power, presentation, and poison disguised as civility. She tapped the microphone once. Order, she said, her voice slicing through the murmurs. Tonight's meeting addresses 2 pressing concerns: ongoing non-compliance at Lot 47 and the coordinated defamation campaign targeting this board's reputation. That was my cue. I walked in late on purpose, letting the room see me before I spoke, letting them remember the video, the ramp, the headlines that had already begun to ripple through local news. Every eye followed me as I took a seat near the back, every eye except hers. The enforcer in crimson didn't blink. Mr. Grant, she said coldly, how generous of you to join us. Since you're the subject of both discussions, perhaps you'd like to save us all time and make your defense now. I smiled faintly. Gladly. She gestured toward the floor. Proceed. I stood, slow and steady, pulling a folder from under my arm. First, I want to thank everyone for coming. I know it's not easy showing up when the person in charge prefers ruling through fear. The tyrant in heels stiffened. Stick to the agenda. Oh, I am, I said, because the agenda tonight isn't mine. It's hers. And I think the community deserves to see exactly what that means. I opened the folder and spread out the copies. Nathan had made sure every seat had one. Pages fluttered like wings across the tables. Emails, invoices, insurance reports, each one stamped with her signature. The murmurs rose instantly. What is this? Someone demanded. Proof, I said, that your board chair has been using association funds for personal gain, filing fraudulent claims, and labeling my disabled daughter's ramp as a non-compliant hazard while pocketing reimbursements under false pretenses. The officer of rules gripped the edge of the podium, her knuckles whitening. You can't just fabricate accusations and parade them like... Fabrications? I interrupted, lifting one of the documents. This one's dated 2 weeks before you threatened to remove the ramp. And this, I held up another page, shows payment approvals to Langford Landscape Services, your cousin's company. Gasps scattered through the room. Someone whispered, She's done. The clipboard queen forced a smile, voice trembling under the weight of exposure. These documents were obtained illegally. This is a violation of board privacy. I met her gaze. Actually, they were obtained by a board member performing his duty of transparency. Nathan stood slowly from the back row, every eye swinging toward him. She's lying, he said. Everything he's showing you is real. I was there when she forged the signatures. A ripple of shock moved through the audience. Victoria turned on him, her voice cracking. You, traitor, after everything I did for you. He met her fury with calm. You didn't do it for me. You did it for control. The enforcer in crimson looked around the room, searching for allies, but they were all gone. The walls she'd built with threats were collapsing, one by one. Enough, she said, slamming the gavel. This meeting is adjourned. No, I said, stepping closer. This meeting is just beginning. Sarah appeared then, my sister, the federal attorney, standing at the doorway with two officials from the DOJ. She held a stack of sealed envelopes. Victoria Langford, she announced. You're being served with a federal summons regarding multiple counts of disability discrimination, fraudulent insurance claims, and obstruction of access. The room froze. The tyrant in heels looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. Her clipboard slipped from her hand, hitting the tile with a hollow clatter. This is harassment, she whispered, voice trembling. No, Sarah said evenly. This is justice. The murmurs turned into quiet cheers, neighbors clapping softly at first, then louder. The sound echoed off the clubhouse walls, washing over the enforcer in crimson, like the verdict she couldn't escape. She tried to leave, but no one moved aside. For the first time, the officer of rules was surrounded by people she couldn't command. I stepped forward one last time. You tried to break my daughter, I said quietly. Now the law will break your empire. Her eyes met mine, furious, humiliated, cornered. And then she walked out, heels clicking like punctuation marks to a rain that had finally ended. The ramp outside gleamed under the rainlight. And for the first time since this war began, the air didn't smell like fear. It smelled like freedom. The next morning, the neighborhood felt eerily calm. But it wasn't peace. It was the quiet that comes after an explosion when everyone's still counting the fragments. The clubhouse confrontation had shaken Brookstone Reserve to its core, and while Victoria Langford's reign as board chair had cracked, she wasn't finished. Not yet. By 9 a.m., a new notice appeared on every door. A single sheet, printed in bold, effective immediately. All residents are to refrain from discussing ongoing legal proceedings involving the HOA board. Any attempt to defame the association may result in legal action. The clipboard queen wasn't issuing rules anymore. She was issuing threats. But the neighbors didn't cower this time. They talked anyway, at mailboxes, on porches, over fences. The enforcer in crimson had spent years silencing them with fear. Now her silence was what terrified her most. Nathan called around noon. She's barricaded herself in the HOA office, he said, deleting emails, wiping drives, shredding documents. She's panicking, I replied, but that means she's sloppy. I think you should come, he added. There's something you need to see. When I arrived, the small office smelled like burnt toner and cheap perfume. Victoria Langford stood behind the desk, her eyes red, but her posture still regal. You don't belong here, she snapped. This is a public facility owned by the residents, I said calmly. And I'm a resident. The tyrant in heels gave a bitter laugh. You really think you've won? The board will elect a new chair by tonight, and every single document you think you have will be discredited. You'll see how fast the system protects people like me. I leaned against the doorframe. Funny thing about systems, they work perfectly until someone shines a light on them. Nathan stepped forward, holding up his phone. Too late for cover-ups, Victoria. The IT backup synced automatically last night. Every file you deleted, already saved to the cloud. Her lips parted slightly, shock flickering before fury swallowed it. You think anyone will believe you over me? They already do, he said quietly. Her voice wavered. You ungrateful coward. He didn't flinch this time. No, I just stopped being afraid. The officer of rules turned toward me, desperate now. You want to destroy me? Go ahead, but you'll destroy this entire community with me. Property values will plummet. No one will buy here again. I met her gaze. That's the difference between us. You built this neighborhood on control. I'm rebuilding it on integrity. She scoffed. Integrity doesn't pay the mortgage. No, I said softly. But it lets me look my daughter in the eye. For a moment, the mask slipped. I saw exhaustion where arrogance used to live. She knew she'd lost. I turned to Nathan. Call Sarah, tell her to get the subpoenas ready. He nodded and stepped outside to make the call. Victoria sat down slowly, staring at the blank wall like it might offer her a script. You don't understand, she said, voice cracking. This was supposed to mean something. Order, discipline, respect. At what cost? I asked. A child's dignity? She didn't answer, just stared at her reflection in the dark computer screen. By evening, news vans lined the street outside Brookstone Reserve. Reporters swarmed the gates, interviewing neighbors who once feared speaking at all. The story had gone public. Local news, national disability rights forums, even morning talk shows. Former HOA president accused of federal fraud and abuse, the headlines read. The clipboard queen tried to control the narrative one last time. She released a statement claiming misunderstandings and media manipulation, but no one was listening anymore. The video of the ramp removal, the forged invoices, and her midnight threats spoke louder than her PR spin. That night, I stood on the porch beside my daughter. She reached for my hand, her wheelchair positioned just outside the door, the same door where this war had started. "Is she gone, Daddy?" she asked. "Almost," I said. "But what she tried to take from us, that's never coming back." Victoria Langford's SUV idled briefly at the end of the street before vanishing into the dark. The tyrant in heels was finally off her throne, replaced not by another dictator, but by an interim board elected by the community itself. Nathan joined us on the porch, a faint smile on his face. "They voted me interim chair," he said. "Good," I replied. "Now make sure no one ever forgets how this happened." He nodded, glancing at the ramp glistening under the porch light. "You know," he said, "it's more than a ramp now. It's a monument." I looked at my daughter, her smile, her strength, the reason behind every fight, and realized he was right. The enforcer in crimson had built her power through fear, but in trying to break us, she'd built something stronger, unity. The courtroom smelled of old wood and new tension. Every seat was taken. Neighbors filled the benches, whispering beneath the heavy air, as the clerk called, "Langford vs. Grant, case 2149. Victoria Langford, once the untouchable board chair, now the defendant, sat perfectly straight at the plaintiff's table, crimson suit immaculate. She looked like a general forced to march into her own defeat. The clipboard queen hadn't come to surrender. She'd come to perform. When the judge entered, she rose smoothly. "Your Honor," she began before being prompted. "This entire proceeding stems from exaggeration and personal vendetta. My actions were lawful under association authority. My attorney, Sarah Grant, my sister, the federal lawyer who had built this case piece by piece, stood with quiet composure. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Ms. Langford's so-called lawful actions included assaulting a disabled child and falsifying insurance reimbursements to conceal it." Gasps rippled through the spectators. The enforcer in crimson didn't flinch. She thrived on the spectacle. "Objection, character assassination." "Sustained in part," the judge said, adjusting his glasses. "Stick to facts, counselor." Sarah nodded, calm as still water. "Let's start with the footage." The screen behind the witness stand flickered alive. The video played. My driveway, the afternoon sunlight, the sound of my daughter's laugh turning into a cry. Victoria's hand striking the wheelchair handle. The moment froze every heart in that room. When the clip ended, silence stretched until it hurt. The officer of rules broke first. "That recording was edited," she said sharply. "You can't hear the full exchange. She was endangering property, blocking the sidewalk. I intervened to prevent harm." Sarah's voice never rose. Prevent harm? By knocking a child sideways and leaving without assistance? The clipboard queen's jaw tightened. "You weren't there." "But I was," said a voice from the back. Nathan Price, the former treasurer, the conflicted witness turned whistleblower, walked to the stand. His eyes met mine briefly, then settled on her. "She told me afterward to keep it quiet. Said accidents happen when people don't respect rules." Victoria's mask fractured. "You're lying," she hissed. He shook his head. "I used to be scared of you, Victoria. Not anymore." The judge tapped his pen. "Ms. Langford, please remain seated." She did not. She stood taller instead, voice trembling between rage and self-pity. "You people don't understand what leadership means. I kept that neighborhood pristine for 10 years. No crime, no vandalism, no disorder, and this—" She pointed toward my daughter seated beside Sarah. "This family dragged us into chaos." The tyrant in heels was unraveling in front of cameras. I rose slowly against my lawyer's whispered protest. "Your Honor, may I speak?" He hesitated, then nodded. I faced her. "You call it leadership. I call it cruelty with a clipboard. You think rules keep us safe, but all they did was give you permission to forget your own humanity. The courtroom fell quiet. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to pause. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Sarah stepped forward again. For the record, the Federal Civil Rights Office has confirmed that Ms. Langford's actions violated Title III of the ADA. Criminal referral is under review. The gavel struck once. Enough. This hearing is concluded. Judgment pending federal determination. As the judge exited, the board chair exhaled shakily, her defiance crumbling into disbelief. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing like lightning. She shielded her face, muttering, "This isn't over. It can't be over." Outside, sunlight flooded the courthouse steps. My daughter wheeled beside me. The ramp they'd tried to erase now replicated on the courthouse entryway itself, a symbolic reminder carved into stone. Sarah smiled faintly. "Funny, justice has better accessibility than your neighborhood ever did." I looked back once through the glass doors. Victoria Langford stood alone in the corridor, crimson jacket stark against gray marble, no longer the enforcer, just a woman staring at the wreckage of her own rules. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just closure. 2 weeks after the hearing, Brookstone Reserve wasn't the same neighborhood anymore. The silence that used to feel like order now sounded like people holding their breath, waiting for someone else to speak first. But that night, every porch light was on. Every driveway was lined with folding chairs, and for the first time in years, the board meeting was public, mandatory in fact, by court order. I stood in the back beside Nathan and Sarah, watching residents trickle into the recreation hall. The air buzzed with whispers, the kind that carry both anger and anticipation. The board chair, Victoria Langford, sat at the center table in her crimson blazer, shoulders drawn tight, eyes scanning the crowd like a monarch forced to kneel before her subjects. When the gavel struck, she cleared her throat. "This meeting will come to order. We will begin with Agenda Item 1. Someone from the front row interrupted. "Apologies first." Another voice followed. "We deserve the truth." The clipboard queen's lips curved in a brittle smile. "This is not a trial. The matter is already—" "Settled," I said loudly. Heads turned. "The court didn't settle anything, Victoria. It exposed everything." The enforcer in crimson froze mid-sentence. "Mr. Grant, residents are reminded that disorderly conduct—" "Disorderly conduct?" I stepped forward. "You slammed a wheelchair, doctored insurance forms, and threatened half the street into silence. You don't get to talk about order." Gasps rippled through the hall. Cameras from 2 local news crews glinted beneath the fluorescent lights. The tyrant in heels kept her composure by sheer force, tapping her pen like a metronome of denial. "You're grandstanding for sympathy," she said coldly. "My record speaks for itself." "Yeah," Nathan called out, "and so do the emails you forged." He projected the messages onto the hall screen, digital receipts of manipulated signatures and backdated approvals. Murmurs turned into open outrage. The officer of rules slammed her folder shut. "You had no authorization to access those." "Wrong again," Sarah replied. "The subpoena gave us full forensic access. Every fraudulent claim, every falsified vote. It's all verified." The room erupted. Some neighbors shouted in anger, others in disbelief. One elderly resident stood trembling, tears streaking his face. "You fined my wife for planting a rose bush," he said. "Said it violated landscape uniformity. She cried for days." Victoria's mask cracked. "Those rules were—" "Your rules," I cut in. "Written to keep power, not peace." For a moment, chaos reigned, voices overlapping, decades of fear spilling into raw fury. I glanced at my daughter near the back, her small hands clasped together, eyes wide but calm. She whispered something to Sarah, who smiled softly. It steadied me. I turned back to the crowd. "You all deserve better. These policies weren't meant to protect property. They were meant to protect people. And somewhere along the way, we forgot that." Applause started, hesitant at first, then rising like a tide. The clipboard queen looked around, realizing control was slipping from her grasp. "Enough!" she barked. "This is still my meeting." Sarah stepped forward. "Not anymore. By unanimous petition under Section 14C, the board has voted you out, effective immediately." The gavel in Victoria Langford's hand hovered midair. She stared at the faces before her. Neighbors she'd ruled through fear now staring back without it. "You can't remove me," she whispered. I built this community. No, I said quietly. You built a prison and called it order. We just decided to walk out. Her hand trembled. The gavel slipped, clattering to the floor. The sound echoed like an ending. Reporters surged closer. Flashbulbs exploded. The enforcer in crimson stood, eyes glistening with a fury she could no longer disguise. You think you've won? Wait until the lawsuits start. I'll bury you in paperwork. I smiled faintly. Good thing my sister loves paperwork. Laughter rippled through the hall, real, cathartic, defiant. As she stormed out, the community voted to dissolve the existing board. Nathan was nominated interim president by acclamation. The motion passed without a single opposing hand. When the meeting adjourned, people poured outside beneath the streetlights. Some cried, some hugged. My daughter wheeled up beside me and whispered, "She can't hurt us anymore, can she?" I knelt, meeting her eyes. "No, sweetheart. Not now, not ever again." Inside the hall, the gavel still lay on the floor, silent, useless, and finally out of her grip. The morning after the vote, the neighborhood looked almost unrecognizable. Lawns were imperfect, mailboxes mismatched, laughter unrestrained. For the first time, Brookstone Reserve sounded alive. No patrol cars, no citations taped to doors, just children's voices echoing through the cul-de-sac, like the place was remembering what freedom felt like. I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee that actually tasted like peace. The board chair was gone. The gavel lay boxed in evidence custody, its echo still haunting the hall where she'd ruled for years. Then, from down the street, I saw her. Victoria Langford, no longer the enforcer in crimson, but a woman in gray slacks and a plain coat, walking toward me with hesitant steps. Reporters had hounded her since the hearing, but today there were no cameras. Just two people who'd once shared a fence line and a war. She stopped a few yards away. "I came for my things," she said quietly. "They're by the clubhouse gate," I answered. "Locked for now. Nathan has the key." The clipboard queen's eyes flickered with old irritation, then exhaustion. "Do you really think you fixed anything? They'll turn on you next. Order doesn't survive democracy." I met her gaze. "Maybe not. But at least now, if someone falls, it won't be because of you." For a heartbeat, she looked human, haunted even. "You think I enjoyed it?" she asked. "Writing violations, enforcing rules. It was the only way to keep control." "The only control you had," I said softly, "was over fear." The tyrant in heels took a step closer, voice trembling beneath pride. "I built this neighborhood from nothing. Before I came, this place was chaos." I gestured toward the open lawns, the neighbors planting trees together. "And now, it's community." Her jaw tightened. "You'll see how long it lasts." She turned to leave, but paused when my daughter's wheelchair rolled into view. The girl smiled, calm and unafraid. Victoria's expression faltered, the briefest flash of regret before she forced her chin up again. "Tell her," she began, then stopped. "Never mind." She walked away, the officer of rules reduced to a shadow among the mailboxes she once policed. Sarah joined me a moment later, a small grin tugging her lips. "They're reopening the park today," she said. "No restrictions. I even convinced the city to install proper ramps." I nodded, watching the crew assemble the new signage. "Public access. All welcome." The words gleamed like an apology from the world itself. Neighbors gathered gradually, laughter swelling where tension used to live. Nathan handed out lemonade. Kids chalked the sidewalks. My daughter wheeled to the playground's edge and touched the ramp rails, new metal, smooth and strong. "She earned this," Sarah whispered. "No," I said quietly. "We all did." Then I felt a tap on my shoulder. A journalist I didn't recognize held up a recorder. "Mr. Grant, any comment for the local feature? People are calling you the man who stood up to the HOA machine." I looked out at the crowd, at the sunlight glinting off the swings. "I'm not the story," I said. "The story is that people finally realized fear only works when you stay quiet." He nodded and left. Sarah laughed. "That was almost humble." "Almost," I admitted. As dusk fell, the first community dinner since the ordeal began stretched across the street. Tables joined end to end, candles flickering, music drifting through open windows. Even the houses looked different in that glow, like the paint had deepened somehow. Maybe freedom adds color. my daughter raised her cup of soda. To new rules, she teased. I smiled. To no rulers. The crowd echoed it back, a simple phrase carrying the weight of months of pain and courage. Far down the street, a lone figure watched from behind tinted glass. The enforcer in crimson, now faceless in the back of a taxi. The driver asked for a destination. She didn't answer. Her reflection in the window looked tired, almost small. Maybe somewhere inside, she finally understood what she'd destroyed. The taxi turned the corner and disappeared. I glanced at the sky, clear, silent, forgiving. If you've ever watched someone abuse power, I said to the camera at the edge of the table, voice steady but raw. Remember this. They only win if we stop standing up. Then, with a quiet breath, I added the closing line meant for everyone watching. If you've ever stood your ground against unfair power, you belong here. Share your story below, and tell me where you're watching from.